The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed overhead as I pressed my palm against the cold metal of the morgue door, my wedding ring clicking against the handle. 23 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with me standing in a basement that smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't name. The construction foreman had called me at 2:15 that afternoon. "Mrs. Caldwell, there's been an accident. Braden fell from the scaffolding." Those words kept replaying in my head as I followed the coroner down the hallway, my heels echoing against the linoleum. Dr. Hensley was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been gentle when he explained that Braden had died on impact, that there was nothing the paramedics could have done. But now, as we stood beside the covered gurney, something in his expression had shifted. His hands fidgeted with his clipboard, and he kept glancing at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Mrs. Caldwell, before we proceed, I need to ask you something unusual. During the preliminary examination, we discovered, well, something unexpected." My stomach dropped. What could be unexpected about a construction accident? "What kind of something?" I managed to whisper. He pulled back the sheet covering Braden's torso, revealing the pale skin I'd kissed goodbye that morning. "There's a foreign object embedded in his abdomen. It's not related to the fall." My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of the metal table. "What do you mean, foreign object?" The words came out strangled, barely recognizable as my own voice. Dr. Hensley moved to a nearby tray and picked up what looked like a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was something I couldn't quite make out, metallic, about the size of a quarter, with tiny wires extending from it. "We believe it's some kind of electronic device. It was surgically implanted, probably months ago based on the healing around the insertion site." The room started spinning. Surgically implanted? Braden had never mentioned any surgery. He'd been healthy, strong, complained about nothing more than the occasional backache from hauling materials at job sites. "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, fragments of memory started surfacing. Those late nights when he claimed he was working overtime. The hushed phone calls he'd take outside on the porch. The way he'd been so secretive about his medical appointments lately, brushing off my concerns with just routine checkups, Marlena. Dr. Hensley's voice seemed to come from far away. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm required by law to report this to the authorities. This type of device, it's not medical in nature. We need to involve the police." Police. The word hit me like a physical blow. What had my husband been involved in? 23 years of marriage, 2 kids we'd raised together, a house we'd built with our own hands. And now this stranger in a lab coat was telling me that the man I'd shared a bed with every night had been carrying some kind of secret device inside his body. The police arrived within an hour. Detective Rivera was a woman about my age, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and a voice that somehow managed to be both professional and gentle. "Mrs. Caldwell, I know this is an incredibly difficult time, but I need to ask you some questions about your husband's recent activities." We sat in Dr. Hensley's cramped office while he explained the device to Detective Rivera. "It's a GPS tracking chip, but modified. There are additional components we haven't identified yet, possibly for data storage or transmission." Rivera took notes methodically, occasionally glancing up at me with an expression I couldn't read. When Dr. Hensley finished, she turned her attention to me. "Did your husband ever mention being involved in any kind of witness protection program? Any legal troubles? Debts to dangerous people?" I shook my head numbly. Braden was a construction supervisor. He built houses, fixed roofs. The most dangerous thing in his life was a power saw. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Those mysterious phone calls, the way he'd started paying for everything in cash over the past few months, how he'd insisted on handling all our finances himself, something that had never bothered me before, but now seemed suspicious. Rivera leaned forward. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to be direct with you. This type of device isn't something you just stumble across. It's expensive, sophisticated. Someone wanted to track your husband's every movement, and based on the surgical precision of the implantation, he knew about it." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. Braden had known. He'd voluntarily had this thing put inside him and never told me. "We're going to need to search your home, examine his personal effects, bank records, Phone records. I'm sorry, but your husband may have been involved in something that got him killed. The search warrant came the next morning. I stood in my kitchen watching strangers rifle through 23 years of my life, pulling out drawers, emptying closets, photographing everything. My sister Corinne had driven down from Portland as soon as I called her, and now she stood beside me with her arm around my shoulders, whispering reassurances I couldn't quite believe. There has to be an explanation, Marlena. This isn't the Braden we know. But was it? Detective Rivera emerged from Braden's home office carrying a metal lockbox I'd never seen before. Mrs. Caldwell, do you have the key to this? I shook my head, feeling like I was watching someone else's life unravel. She had the locksmith they'd brought along open it right there on my dining room table. Inside were documents, photographs, and $15,000 in cash bundled with rubber bands. The photographs made my stomach lurch. They showed men in expensive suits meeting in parking garages, exchanging briefcases, having conversations in what looked like restaurant booths. In several of them, I could see Braden in the background, not participating, but clearly watching, clearly documenting. Your husband appears to have been conducting surveillance, Rivera said carefully. These photos span several months. Do you recognize any of these men? I stared at the faces, trying to process what I was seeing. One man looked familiar, Vincent Torino, who owned half the construction companies in the city. Braden had worked for him on and off for years. Another face belonged to City Councilman Bradley Nash, someone whose campaign signs had been in our yard just last election. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would Braden be taking pictures of these people? Corinne squeezed my hand tighter. Maybe he stumbled onto something illegal and was trying to document it. Maybe he was trying to do the right thing. But Rivera's expression suggested it might not be that simple. She pulled out a manila folder filled with bank statements, accounts I'd never heard of, deposits that made no sense based on Braden's construction salary, payments of $5,000, $10,000, sometimes more, coming in monthly for the past 8 months. The worst part was the final document in the box, a life insurance policy for $2 million, taken out just 6 months ago, with me as the beneficiary. A policy I'd never known existed. The news broke 3 days later. Local construction worker had secret life, screamed the headline in the Tribune, complete with a photo of our house surrounded by police cars. My phone started ringing at 6 in the morning and didn't stop. Reporters, neighbors, old friends who suddenly wanted to know if I'd known all along. I stopped answering after the 5th person asked if I was in on it. Corinne fielded most of the calls while I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the business card Detective Rivera had left behind. She'd told me to call if I remembered anything unusual, but what I remembered were all the normal things. Braden making pancakes on Sunday mornings, helping our daughter Kaylee with her college applications last year, teaching our son Mason how to install drywall. How do you reconcile those memories with surveillance photos and secret bank accounts? The doorbell rang around noon. Through the peephole, I saw a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. Corinne answered while I stayed back, and I heard him introduce himself as Agent Marcus Webb from the FBI. The FBI. My legs nearly gave out. Mrs. Caldwell, we need to talk about your husband's work with our organized crime task force. The words hit me like a physical blow. Organized crime task force. Agent Webb sat across from me in my living room, the same room where Braden and I had watched movies every Friday night for over 2 decades, and explained that my husband had been a confidential informant for the past year. He came to us after witnessing what he believed was money laundering through construction contracts. Vincent Torino's company was being used to clean money for some very dangerous people. So he was one of the good guys? Corinne asked, and I could hear the hope in her voice. But Agent Webb's expression remained grim. Your husband was helping us build a case, but 3 weeks ago he missed a scheduled check-in. We were concerned something had happened to him. The tracking device was for his protection, but also to monitor his movements, when it suddenly went silent the day he died. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Mrs. Caldwell, we don't believe your husband's death was an accident. Agent Webb leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Mrs. Caldwell, your husband had gathered enough evidence to bring down a network that's been operating in this city for years. Construction contracts worth millions, all designed to legitimize dirty money, but someone found out he was working with us. The weight of his words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Someone had killed my husband. The man I'd kissed goodbye that morning, who'd promised to pick up milk on his way home, had been murdered. "We believe there's a leak in the city government," Webb continued. "Someone with access to information about ongoing investigations. Your husband's last report mentioned he thought he was being watched. The tracking device showed unusual movement patterns in his final week, like he was trying to avoid being followed." Corinne gripped my hand so tight it hurt, but I barely felt it. Everything I thought I knew about that last week was crumbling. Braden hadn't been working late. He'd been running scared. Webb pulled out a tablet and showed me surveillance footage from various locations around the city. "We need your help, Mrs. Caldwell. Your husband left something for us, but we can't find it. He mentioned in his last communication that he'd hidden additional evidence somewhere safe, somewhere only you would think to look." The screen showed grainy images of Braden meeting with different people, always looking over his shoulder, always checking his surroundings. This wasn't the confident man I'd married. This was someone terrified for his life. "What kind of evidence?" I managed to ask. "Documents, photos, maybe recordings. Something that would complete the case against Torino and identify the leak in City Hall. Without it, these people walk free, and whoever killed your husband gets away with murder." Webb's phone buzzed, and his expression darkened as he read the message. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to be direct. Vincent Torino was released on bail 2 hours ago. His people know we're closing in, and they know your husband was our source. You and your family may be in danger." The room started spinning again. Danger. My children were in danger because of secrets Braden had kept from me. "What are you saying?" Corinne demanded. "That she needs to go into hiding?" Webb nodded grimly. "We can offer protection, but we need that evidence first. Mrs. Caldwell, where would your husband hide something he wanted to keep absolutely safe?" After Webb left, I sat in my bedroom staring at the walls Braden had painted 3 summers ago. Where would he hide something? I thought about our life together, our private jokes, the places that meant something only to us. Then it hit me. The first house we'd ever built together, a small starter home on Maple Street that we'd sold when Kaylee was born. Braden had insisted on keeping one key, said it was sentimental. I'd teased him about it for years. Corinne drove me there at sunset. The current owners, the Hendersons, were friends from church who knew about Braden's death. When I explained I needed to check something he might have left in the crawl space, our old hiding spot for Christmas presents, they didn't ask questions. The space was cramped and dusty, but there it was, a metal box wrapped in plastic, tucked behind the water heater exactly where Braden used to hide my anniversary gifts. Inside were dozens of documents, USB drives, and a letter addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it. "Marlena, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, but I had to protect you and the kids. The man I thought was helping me, Detective Rivera, has been feeding information to Torino. She's the leak. Don't trust her. The evidence in this box will prove everything, but be careful who you give it to. I love you forever." B? My blood turned to ice. Detective Rivera. The woman who'd seemed so kind, so professional. She'd been in our house, knew everything about the investigation. She'd probably told Torino exactly when and how to eliminate Braden. I called Webb immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Then I called the FBI field office, but they said he was in a meeting and couldn't be disturbed. That's when I heard the car doors slamming outside. Through the Hendersons' front window, I saw 2 black SUVs parked on the street. Men in dark suits were walking toward the house, and in the second vehicle, I could see Detective Rivera talking on her phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. They'd followed us. They knew we'd found the evidence. Mrs. Henderson appeared beside me, confusion written across her face. "Marlena, who are those people?" I grabbed the box and pulled her away from the window. "Call 911, I whispered. "Tell them we need help. Now." The doorbell rang, followed immediately by heavy knocking. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is Detective Rivera. We need to talk." Her voice carried a false friendliness that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Henderson was already on the phone with 911, whispering frantically into the receiver. I clutched the evidence box against my chest, my mind racing. The back door. We could slip out through the kitchen while they were focused on the front. "Marlena, I know you're in there," Rivera called out, her tone shifting to something harder. "We just want to have a conversation about what your husband left behind. No one needs to get hurt." The threat was clear beneath her words. Corinne grabbed my arm, her face pale with terror. "What do we do?" she whispered. I looked at my sister, at Mrs. Henderson still pleading with the emergency dispatcher, at the box containing the truth about my husband's murder. Something inside me snapped. I'd spent the last week being a victim of circumstances, of lies, of other people's secrets. But I was done being pushed around. I was done letting other people control my story. "Mrs. Henderson, is there a way to your neighbor's yard without going outside?" She nodded toward the kitchen. "The fence gate. It leads to the Kowalski's backyard." I made my decision. "Corinne, take Mrs. Henderson and go. Get to the neighbors and wait for the real police." I pressed one of the USB drives into her hand. "If something happens to me, make sure Agent Webb gets this." She started to protest, but I cut her off. "Go. Now." They slipped out the back door just as I heard Rivera's voice getting closer to the kitchen window. I walked to the front door, evidence box still in my arms, and opened it. Rivera stood there with two men I didn't recognize, both wearing the kind of suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Detective Rivera," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Or should I say, the woman who got my husband killed?" Her expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Mrs. Caldwell, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Why don't you give me whatever you found in there, and we can all walk away from this?" I held the box tighter. "The way Braden walked away?" "Oh wait, he didn't. He fell from a building after you told Vincent Torino exactly where to find him." Rivera's mask finally slipped, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Marlena. Give me the box." "You're right," I said, stepping back into the hallway. "I have no idea what I'm dealing with, but I know exactly who I'm dealing with." I pulled out my phone and held it up so Rivera could see the screen. "I've been recording this entire conversation. Your confession about Braden is already uploaded to 3 different cloud accounts." It was a lie, but the flash of panic across her face told me she believed it. One of the men stepped forward, reaching inside his jacket, but Rivera stopped him with a raised hand. "You're bluffing, Marlena. You're a suburban housewife who's in way over her head." But I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Maybe I am," I replied, backing slowly toward the kitchen. "But this suburban housewife learned a few things from her husband, like how to set up automatic uploads, like how to create backup plans." The sound of sirens was getting closer. Real sirens, not Torino's people. Rivera's expression hardened. "Give me the box, and maybe you'll live long enough to see your children graduate." The threat hung in the air between us, but instead of terror, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: absolute clarity. "You know what, detective? You already took everything that mattered to me. My husband, my sense of security, my trust in people who are supposed to protect us, but you didn't take my voice." I grabbed a kitchen knife from Mrs. Henderson's counter and sliced open one of the USB drives I'd kept back, spilling its contents across the floor. These drives contain bank records, recorded conversations, photographs of money exchanges, everything Braden documented about your arrangement with Torino. Rivera lunged forward, but I was already moving, scattering documents everywhere. "Even if you kill me right here, it's too late. My sister has copies. Agent Webb will have copies. The whole truth is already out there." The front door burst open and real police officers flooded in. Uniformed cops I recognized from community events, not Rivera's corrupt network. Behind them came Agent Webb, gun drawn, face grim with purpose. "Detective Rivera, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder." Rivera's composure finally cracked completely. She looked at me with pure hatred as the handcuffs clicked into place. "This isn't over, Marlena. You have no idea how deep this goes." But I did know. And for the first time since Braden's death, I wasn't afraid. 6 months later, I stood in the federal courthouse watching Vincent Torino led away in handcuffs. The trial had been brutal. Weeks of testimony, media attention, and reliving every detail of Braden's final months. But it was worth it. Torino got 25 years. Rivera got 15. 3 city council members, including Bradley Nash, were also convicted. The construction corruption network that had operated for over a decade was finally dismantled. Agent Webb found me outside the courthouse. "Mrs. Caldwell, I wanted to thank you personally. Without your courage, none of this would have been possible." I looked at him, this man who'd helped me understand that my husband died a hero, not a criminal. "Braden did the hard part," I said. "I just finished what he started." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't entirely true. The woman who'd stood in that kitchen 6 months ago, terrified and demanding answers, was different from the woman standing here today. The insurance money, all $2 million, had been cleared by the FBI once they confirmed Braden's cooperation with their investigation. I'd used part of it to establish a foundation for families of law enforcement informants, people who sacrificed everything to do what was right. The rest went into college funds for Kaylee and Mason, and a small house for Corinne, who decided to move closer to help me rebuild my life. That evening, I sat in my backyard looking at the garden Braden and I had planted together 3 springs ago. The tomatoes were coming in beautifully, the same variety he'd insisted would grow best in our soil. He'd been right about that, just like he'd been right about so many things I was only now beginning to understand. The man I'd married had kept secrets, yes, but he'd kept them to protect not just me and our children, but an entire community from people who would have destroyed it for profit. My phone buzzed with a text from Kaylee. "Mom, saw the news about the sentencing. Dad would be so proud of you." I smiled, tears blurring my vision. Maybe he would be. The scared, grieving widow who'd stood in that morgue 7 months ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd learned that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you never expected to fight. Someone who'd discovered that surviving isn't just about getting through the worst day of your life. It's about deciding what kind of person you become because of it.
Oh,